Hello and welcome to Mediation Works. I'm Wendy Lakusta and I have my colleague with me here, Sharon Sutherland. And today we have a special guest, Kyra Hudson. And Kyra today is going to talk about workplace-related disputes.
Right.
Yeah. And so to start that off, Kyra, can you talk a little bit about just generally what kinds of disputes that you would see related to workplace?
Sure. Mm-hmm. So there's, quite a spectrum in terms of the different areas that we might find workplace mediation. And, my practice sort of deals in one area. There is a lot of work in the human rights kind of area, and I probably won't talk about that because my practice doesn't focus there. I deal more with dysfunction in the workplace. So conflict people are having at work between employees, employees between managers, that kind of thing.
Okay. Could you give us maybe some examples of what those would look like? What kind of disputes in a workplace you might get called in for?
Sure. I mean, it's a full spectrum, but usually it's some kind of miscommunication, and it starts between usually two individuals. So an example might be there's some sort of gossip that's happening, and you know how gossip goes, and that seems to sort of swirl around and get a group of people upset with another group of people, and then you find a real dysfunctional kind of work group. Another example that happens a lot lately is employees are having problems with either sort of poor performance evaluations that either aren't happening, or when they eventually do happen, people are surprised by the feedback that they're getting. So that seems to be a bit of a trigger point between employees and managers or supervisors. That's another sort of common one I'm seeing.
Okay. And how do you usually get involved in these mediations? Who contacts you and how do you get involved?
Well, usually it's from the employer. So an employer representative, either a manager or supervisor, or somebody like a director of HR, somebody from human resources that's managing or has been trying to manage this issue, and then they can't really figure out what to do with it, so then they reach out for support. It could be an employee, and if an employee felt like a collaborative kind of facilitated process would help them, that would be fine too. But the best thing is usually for them to reach out to somebody internally in their workplace, somebody in supervisor kind of role, and then they will reach out to me.
And then what do you do, Kyra, when they reach out to you? What actually happens? What does this look like?
Well, it looks like a lot of different things lately. And so it's not just mediation. Sometimes it's more sort of proactive, talking to people about, they want to tell me their plan, and this is sort of what I'm dealing with, and what do you think, how might I manage this conflict? And so sometimes it's more of that sort of proactive work in those sorts of conversations. Sometimes it's meeting with one or two or many of the parties that are in conflict, and sometimes it's meeting with them all together. Sometimes it's meeting with people in a kind of ongoing follow-up way, sort of coaching them through their own challenges with dealing with their own conflict. So there's sort of a lot of different areas that it comes in and seems to be useful in the workplace.
And just you're using the coaching word, and that's one of those words that I keep hearing all the time in workplace lately. There seems to be an awful lot of talk around conflict management coaching as this new thing that we could be doing. Is that something, exactly the kind of coaching you're talking about?
I think that's the kind of coaching I'm talking about, and I'm hearing that too, and I'm hearing that from other people. And I think where it's coming from is that employers are interested in, dealing with things as early as possible, and so they want to have as much or as many tools that they can have to put to solve problems right there in the workplace. So yeah, I think coaching is, it's useful, and people are doing it.
And it sounds like, it sounds like the process, you do tend to customize it, depending on the situation.
Completely.
And it could be multiple sessions. Do you normally do pre-mediation meetings and to prepare people and that kind of thing?
That's pretty important, and it also allows me to sort of do a bit of a fact-finding around what's really going on, and get a sense of what the culture is of the organization, and sort of what the background of this dispute is. Has it been going on for some time? Does it, bring in a number of people? Is there something underneath that really needs to be resolved, so that we're not just sort of dealing with the symptoms and not getting to the real root of things? But it can look different, and it just depends on what the needs of the organization are, and what they're hoping to achieve.
And how about how do you finalize some kind of agreement? Does that look different in different circumstances?
It can, and in some cases I laugh because I've had some cases where people have said, "Ha ha, are we going to write this down?" And I said, "We sure are," and we do. And sometimes it's just agreement about how people are going to speak to each other going forward, or the kind of follow-up meetings that they want to have, and we do write it down so that people have it in writing, and then they can refer back to that. And usually, in most cases, it's an agreement between individuals as well as somebody else from the organization, so that the organization, has a sense of what the plan is for the people who are having some dysfunction, or what for the team who's having dysfunction, and can say, okay, this is the plan, and they can refer back to it if they need to.
And I'm wondering about participation in terms of who's participating.
Yeah.
Obviously, the people who are in the dispute would have to be there. Is there sensitivity around having management attend, or who makes those decisions, and how does that work?
Well, I think that, again, it sort of comes down to what kind of dispute it is, and sort of how many people are involved. And in many cases, there's an opportunity for confidentiality, and so there is an opportunity for just meeting with the parties. And then sometimes it's useful to bring management or supervisors in sort of later on in the process. Just sort of depends, again, on what their needs are and what they're looking to achieve.
Okay, let me just ask a question kind of coming from the employer perspective. Is this going to be something that only a really big employer can afford? So is this major corporations that are bringing you in, or can small businesses use this?
Well, I think for a small business, this is a great resource, because this is the way that you can sort of nip the problem in the bud early, and not have something that sort of spirals out of control and could end up in hopefully not some sort of harassment complaint or formalized dispute resolution. These are the work I do is for large and small employers. It's for public and private, unionized and non-unionized. So it's sort of across the board. And what I know is that employers want to solve problems quickly and efficiently, and this is one of the best ways for them to do that.
Just a follow-up on that, and this is really just because I know that a lot of people are struggling to find resources, and how do you find mediators, and how do you do that kind of thing. And one of the groups that I sometimes see calls from are not-for-profits, and they're working with volunteers rather than employees, or it might be a dispute between the one employee and the 20 volunteers in an organization. Do those become appropriate for a workplace dispute?
Those happen an awful lot for mediating or a collaborative process. I'm involved with one now that's been going on for some time, for a few years, with a nonprofit between employees and board members, actually. And so they're volunteer board members, and they just haven't had the tools on how to solve this, and so it's sort of been getting worse and festering a little bit. And so now I've come in and I've met with a lot of the different parties, and I have a bit more of a sense of what's going to happen, and I can go back to them and give them some options about how we might proceed. It's would have been better if they'd called me a little bit earlier, of course, but this isn't something that's going to take years to solve, and it's not going to take the same kind of investment financially that some kind of litigation would cost if there was somebody who ended up leaving and then had a wrongful dismissal suit.
Right. And speaking of litigation, all three of us mediate in the small claims court.
That's right.
And the type of dispute we see there very often in small claims is wrongful dismissal.
Right, yes.
Do you do any of those privately, or how does that look to you?
So I've done a few privately. It's not a huge part of my practice. I know other people who do it as well. I think that it is a great area to use mediation for, and I like to tell people that they don't need to be in litigation to reach out for mediation in those circumstances. And so I think it's another area related to workplace that's very useful for mediation.
Yeah, I guess one of the things with the wrongful dismissal, it comes up in, obviously, the small claims where we do it. You see studies of it because it comes up in a bunch of the different mandatory programs around North America. And one of the things I've always found interesting is that most of the studies, they'll break it into what case types are settling the most. And wrongful dismissal seems to be one of those ones that just particularly lends itself to a single session model of mediation settlement. And I guess that's something that probably is worth commenting on, just so people know that even when you're outside of these workplace disputes, and the relationship has been severed, there's still a possibility to use this kind of tool.
That's true. And I've seen lots of circumstances, I don't know if the two of you have, where those sorts of wrongful dismissal mediations can end with people, both the organization and the former employee, feeling better about how things are severed. You know, they still walk away from it, but they don't have, such hard feelings, and everyone can, start fresh at that point.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Kyra, thank you so much for taking the time to come out and chat with us about workplace mediation. It sounds like there's just a huge array of different things that are possible out there, but it's really helpful to have some concrete examples like you've given us to just talk about this is what you might do. One of the things we've been saying to everybody is we're going to try and attach resources to our videos and make sure that we've got some links and things so people can find more information. But this was a great start. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.